so it's impossible to tell if the early humans had gods or if they worshipped something or someone. But is this really so? We are going to answer this question in today's episode. Did cavemen have gods? Let's find out. Caveman refers to a period in human history between 2.6 million and 10,000 years ago. This was the time when humans used primitive tools made of stone, wood, and bone. However, this description covers a very long period of time and different regions of the world. For example, people living in Europe 10,000 years ago looked and behaved very differently from the ones living in Africa 2 million years ago. Moreover, generalizing about a group of people that diverse and spread across the entire planet isn't accurate. For this reason, researchers prefer to use other terms instead of caveman, such as early humans, prehistoric humans, ancient humans, Pleistocene humans, or just humans from the Stone Age. Regardless of what you call them, scientists don't agree on whether these early humans had any form of religion or if they believed in gods. One argument against the idea of early humans worshipping gods is the lack of evidence. Critics claim that even if early humans did have some sort of religion, there's no proof that they worshipped gods. The only way to know what early humans believed in is by studying the remnants of their activities. And all the artifacts that archaeologists have found so far, such as cave paintings, rock art, sculptures, and burial sites, can be interpreted in different ways. For instance, some argue that the famous cave paintings in Lascaux, France, which date back 15 to 17,000 years, show animals that early humans wanted to hunt, or that they were simply imitating the movements of animals for entertainment purposes. Others believe that these paintings are part of a religious ritual. In fact, some archaeologists claim that the alignment of certain paintings with astronomical phenomena suggests that they were used to predict eclipses or seasonal changes. But these theories are often challenged by other experts, and the same goes for other types of evidence, such as animal bones that may or may not have been used in rituals or buried with a dead person. There are also various burial sites of early humans that suggest different beliefs and practices. Some bodies were found lying on their backs with their arms and legs spread out, while others were curled up in a fetal position. Some graves contained more than one individual, while others had multiple layers, indicating that they were reused over time. These examples illustrate the complexity of interpreting archaeological evidence. What may seem like a religious practice to one researcher could be seen as mundane and everyday life by another. This is because many aspects of human culture, including religion, are subjective and based on meaning-making rather than physical objects. Unfortunately, most of the evidence related to early humans' beliefs has been lost over time. This makes it difficult to draw any firm conclusions about their religious beliefs, if they had any. However, some anthropologists argue that early humans must have had some sort of belief system since they exhibited behaviors that couldn't be explained by purely biological factors. They point to examples such as the use of body and face paint, the creation of ornaments and jewelry, and the production of symbolic objects such as Venus figurines. These are all signs of cognitive abilities and symbolic thinking that suggest early humans had a rich inner world, including possibly religious ideas and practices. This brings us to the second argument, the argument from design. Proponents of this view claim that the complexity and diversity of human cultures and behaviors indicate that early humans must have had some sort of guiding force or intelligence behind them. This argument is similar to the argument from design used by supporters of intelligent design as an alternative to evolution. Intelligent design argues that the complexity of living organisms points to a designer rather than natural processes. Similarly, some anthropologists argue that the complexity of human cultures and behaviors, especially those related to death and burial, indicate a designer or a guiding force. For example, they point to the fact that humans from different cultures around the world have similar beliefs and practices related to death and the afterlife, such as the idea that the soul or spirit leaves the body after death, that there is some sort of judgment or evaluation after death, and that the dead should be treated with respect and care. They also point to the fact that humans from different cultures around the world have similar beliefs and practices related to death and the afterlife, such as the idea that the soul or spirit leaves the body after death, that there is some sort of judgment or evaluation after death, and that the dead should be treated with respect and care. Humans also tend to ask questions about where they came from, what happens after death, and what is the meaning of life. These are all signs of a deeper search for meaning and purpose that cannot be explained by purely biological factors. Instead, they suggest that early humans must have had some sort of belief system that provided them with answers to these existential questions. One problem with the argument from design is that it is based on analogy and similarity rather than direct evidence. Just because humans from different cultures around the world have similar beliefs and practices doesn't necessarily mean that they all derived from a common source or that they are true reflections of reality. For example, many cultures have myths about a great flood that destroyed the world, but this doesn't mean that there was only one global flood in the past, or that it had anything to do with religion or gods. Similarly, many cultures have stories about talking animals or magical creatures, but this doesn't mean that such beings exist or that early humans believed in them. Instead, these similarities may reflect the human tendency to create stories and symbols that express their experiences and understanding of the world. Another problem with the argument from design is that it relies on the assumption that humans are rational and logical creatures who always act in a coherent and meaningful way. However, human behavior is often driven by emotions, biases, and heuristics rather than pure reason. Humans also have the ability to hold multiple beliefs and practices that contradict each other or make no sense to outsiders. For example, humans can simultaneously believe in science and religion, in rationality and superstition, in progress and tradition. This means that human behavior and beliefs cannot always be interpreted as signs of a deeper order or intelligence, much less divine guidance. Finally, let's talk about the elephant in the room, actually the mammoth in the room. Humans and mammoths coexisted for thousands of years, yet humans managed to survive and mammoths went extinct. That doesn't sound like a coincidence, does it? Some would say that humans must have had some sort of divine help to overcome the massive mammals, but a closer look at the evidence suggests otherwise. Mammoths were huge and powerful, but they also had some drawbacks. For example, they were slow-moving and had poor eyesight. This made them vulnerable to attacks from predators such as wolves, hyenas, and humans. Humans also learned how to use fire, which gave them an advantage over mammoths, who couldn't regulate their body temperature. Fire helped humans keep warm in cold climates, where mammoths struggled to survive. Humans also had more flexible and adaptable lifestyles than mammoths. They could hunt a variety of animals and plants, not just those that were available in their immediate environment. They could also use tools and weapons made of stone, bone, and later metal, which gave them greater precision and power in hunting and gathering. Finally, humans had bigger brains and more complex language abilities than mammoths, which allowed them to cooperate, innovate, and transmit knowledge to future generations. All these factors contributed to the success of humans and the extinction of mammoths. So did cavemen have gods? Well, that depends on how you define gods. If you define gods as supernatural beings that are all-powerful, all-knowing, and creators of the universe, then the answer is no. There's no evidence that early humans believed in or worshipped such beings. Early humans probably didn't know about physics, biology, or psychology either. Their knowledge was based on experience, observation, and tradition. So they probably didn't have a concept of the universe or its origins. However, if you define gods as spirits, forces, or symbols that humans created to explain and cope with the world around them, then the answer is maybe. There is some evidence that early humans engaged in rituals, ceremonies, and burials that suggest they had beliefs and practices related to death, the afterlife, and the natural world. These beliefs and practices may have served as a way for early humans to cope with the challenges and uncertainties of their environment, such as finding food, avoiding predators, and understanding natural phenomena. The exact origins of religion are unknown, but that doesn't stop people from trying to figure it out. One group of researchers believes that shamans were the first religious leaders. Shamans aren't as common as they once were, but when you meet one, you'll know. That's because shamans typically have rather distinct ways of dressing and acting. They might wear animal skins or bone jewelry and carry staffs made of wood or bone. You'll also likely hear them use drums and rattles as part of their rituals. But don't be fooled by these trappings. A shaman isn't just some guy dressed like a Native American playing a drum in the woods. In fact, this person is probably more powerful than you think, and they've been around for longer than you might expect. But what makes them so special? Well, shamans aren't just spiritual guides, they're also healers, psychologists, and community leaders. This means that in addition to helping people connect with the spirit world, they also deal with very earthly matters, such as curing illness, mediating disputes, and even performing surgery. It's clear that shamans play an important role in society, but does that make them religious leaders? If so, when did they first appear? Let's get into it. When discussing the origins of anything, it's always helpful to start with the word itself. That way, you'll know exactly what you're dealing with. This is especially true when talking about shamanism, which refers to both the person and the practice. The term shaman comes from the Evenki people who live in Siberia and Mongolia. In their language, the word shaman translates to one who is possessed by a spirit. But being possessed isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, in shamanic cultures, it's often seen as a positive experience. That's because the spirits that possess shamans are usually benevolent and want to help them do good things. Of course, not all spirits are this friendly, so shamans have to learn how to control their powers and keep everyone safe. This process of learning is called shamanic training, and it can take years for a shaman to master. Shamans aren't born, they're made. Usually this process begins when someone has a vision or has a near-death experience. These experiences show them that there's more to the universe than meets the eye. Next, the potential shaman must convince his or her community that they have the gift of shamanism. Once they have support, they can begin their training. At first, the novice shaman works under the guidance of an experienced mentor. They'll learn everything there is to know about shamanic traditions and practices. Then, the apprentice will put their knowledge to the test. In some cases, they might need to travel to a special place such as a cave or a mountaintop to undergo a vision quest. This is a kind of solitary retreat where the apprentice tries to see or hear from the spirits. If all goes well, the spirits will accept them as one of their own, and they'll return to the community as a full-fledged shaman. Today there are many different types of shamanism, and each one has its own beliefs and practices. But there are some common themes that run through all of them. Shamans believe that the world is full of spirits, both good and evil. Their job is to help the good spirits and fight the bad ones. To do this, they use a variety of techniques such as drumming, dancing, and chanting. They might also use plants and animals as part of their rituals. For example, some shamans use hallucinogenic mushrooms to help them communicate with spirits. Others might dress up like wolves or bears to transform themselves into these powerful animals. No matter what techniques they use, shamans all have one goal in mind: to bring balance to the world and help people in the process. So if we take the definition of shaman literally, it's easy to see why some scholars think they were the first religious leaders. After all, shamans are often seen as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. They're also responsible for teaching others about the nature of reality and helping them understand their place in the universe. Sounds pretty religious, right? But is it really that simple? To answer this question, let's take a step back and look at what religion is in general. There's no one answer that everyone agrees on, but most definitions include the belief in and worship of a superhuman being or beings. Religion also typically involves rituals and practices that are meant to connect people with the divine. With this in mind, it's easy to see how shamanism could be considered a form of religion. However, it's important to remember that not all shamanic practices are the same. Some shamans believe in one great spirit, while others believe in many. Some focus on healing, while others specialize in fighting evil spirits. Because of this diversity, it's hard to say that all shamans fit our definition of religious. Luckily, we don't need to label them as religious or non-religious to appreciate their importance. Throughout history, shamans have played an integral role in human societies. They've helped people cope with everything from illness to warfare. In many cultures, they're the ones who are called upon to heal the sick or injured. They use a combination of traditional medicine and supernatural powers to cure their patients. Shamans also play an important role in times of conflict. They might offer guidance to warriors before battle or try to heal the wounded. In some cases, they even act as mediators between warring factions. It's clear that shamans have had a profound impact on human history. But what about their place in prehistory? When did shamanic practices first appear? Well, unfortunately, we don't have a definitive answer to this question. Shamanism leaves behind few traces in the archaeological record. That's because it's primarily an oral tradition. This means that much of what we know about shamanism has been passed down through stories and songs rather than written records. What's more, many shamanic beliefs and practices are still kept secret. This is done to prevent them from being distorted or taken out of context. As a result, it's difficult for outsiders to know the full extent of shamanic traditions. However, we do have some clues that can help us piece together the origins of shamanism. For example, we know that shamanic practices were common in Siberia as far back as the Bronze Age. We also know that shamanism played an important role in the cultures of ancient Greece and Rome. In fact, the Greek word for shaman, Saios, may have been used as far back as the 7th century BC. However, these are just isolated examples. We don't know how widespread shamanism was during prehistoric times. Fortunately, there are other ways to study shamanism besides looking at written records. Anthropologists and archaeologists can also examine artifacts such as bones and animal remains. These objects can provide valuable insights into the religious beliefs and practices of prehistoric cultures. For example, in 2003, researchers in Siberia discovered a burial site that contained the remains of a shaman. The burial was unique because it contained a number of objects that were not typically found in graves. These objects included a bone flute, a rattle made of a deer scapula, and a number of animal skulls. The researchers believe that these objects were used in shamanic rituals. Together, these pieces of evidence suggest that shamanism was well established in Siberia by the Bronze Age. However, there is no consensus on when shamanism first appeared. Some scholars believe it originated in Siberia, while others argue that it developed independently in different parts of the world. We do know that shamanism has a long and rich history. It's possible that it was one of the earliest forms of religion, and if so, then shamans truly were the first religious leaders. Whether or not that's the case, there's no denying that shamans have played an important role in human history. They've helped people connect with the spirit world and cope with the challenges of everyday life. And in doing so, they've shaped our understanding of the world around us. So the next time you meet a shaman, be sure to listen to their stories. They may not have all the answers, but they certainly have some interesting tales to tell. Now, when you think of cavemen, I don't know what you imagine, but for me, I always imagine some big lug walking around in loincloth, carrying a spear and chasing after woolly mammoths with his fellow tribe members. I envision him living in some sort of hut or shelter that was barely protecting them from the elements and surviving day by day, trying to hunt down food. It seems almost preposterous that someone who lived like this would have had any sort of complex theological beliefs, let alone believing in an afterlife. But new discoveries suggest that not only did they believe in an afterlife, but their ideas were incredibly similar to some of the ones we have today. So here is the evidence that cavemen believed in an afterlife. Number 1. Caveman burials. Now this is a big one. Hibernation may have been the norm for our hunter-gatherer ancestors, but the general consensus among scientists is that the practice of burying the dead was almost certainly a part of human culture, as long as 100,000 years ago, which is insane. We've found burial sites all across the world that push back the timeline of our ability to plan ahead, think abstractly, and understand death. One example is the Cima de los Huesos site in Spain, where 28 individuals were discovered buried in a pit. They ranged in age from infants to elderly, indicating that no one was exempt from this ritual. Even more telling is the fact that some of these remains date back to 100,000 years ago, putting them in the Neanderthal time period. This means that Neanderthals must have had some sort of belief system that dictated that they bury their dead, which suggests that they had some sort of idea of an afterlife. Burial practices also took place in other parts of the world at this time. For example, in Israel, archaeologists uncovered a burial cave from 100,000 years ago that contained the remains of a man, a woman, and 2 children. The fact that the children were buried with their parents suggest that there was some sort of religious significance to the burial, which again points to the possibility that early humans did believe in an afterlife. This is further supported by the discovery of a burial site in South Africa from 75,000 years ago. This site contained the remains of 16 individuals who had been deliberately arranged in a circle, which suggests that there was a ritualistic element to the burial. These findings are consistent with the theory that early humans did indeed believe in an afterlife, and that they had developed a number of rituals and traditions surrounding death and the disposal of the body. Number 2. Caveman cave paintings. There's no denying that cave paintings are some of the most remarkable achievements of early humans. These paintings provide us with a unique window into the minds of our ancestors and what they believed in. In particular, there is a common theory that the depiction of animals in cave paintings may actually represent the souls of those animals. This theory is based on the fact that many of these paintings show animals that are no longer alive, such as woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. Some scholars believe that early humans saw these extinct animals as the souls of the creatures that still roamed the earth. Another argument for this theory is that many cave paintings depict animals that were never seen by early humans, such as dinosaurs. The fact that these animals are depicted in such detail suggests that early humans must have had some sort of knowledge of them, perhaps through their depiction in dreams or visions. Furthermore, some scholars argue that the use of red ochre in cave paintings may have been intended to symbolize blood, which could represent the life force or soul of the animal being painted. This interpretation is supported by the fact that red ochre was often found near burial sites, suggesting a connection between the mineral and the afterlife. All of this evidence points to the conclusion that early humans may have believed that animals could be reincarnated into other forms after death, which would be an interesting take on the afterlife. However, it should be noted that this theory is still up for debate and there is no concrete evidence to support it. Number 3. Caveman Venus figurines. Caveman Venus figurines are a type of prehistoric sculpture that has been found in various places across Europe and Asia. They date back as far as 35,000 years and typically depict a female figure with exaggerated sexual features. While these sculptures may seem rather crude and simple at first glance, some scholars believe that they actually represent a much deeper meaning. According to this theory, the exaggerated female features on these statues represent the fertility and abundance of the Earth Mother, a common motif in ancient religions. The Venus figurines were created to honor and appease this Earth Mother figure, who was believed to control the fate of humanity. This theory is supported by the fact that many of these sculptures were found in areas where people engaged in agricultural activities, suggesting a connection between the figurines and the fertility of the soil. Additionally, some scholars argue that the large breasts and hips on these statues represent the moon and sun, respectively, linking them to the celestial bodies and their influence over the earth. The idea that Venus figurines represented the Earth Mother figure is a fascinating one. If true, it would suggest that early humans had a deep connection to the natural world and that they believed that the Earth itself was a powerful deity. Number 4. Caveman Rock Art. Caveman Rock Art is another form of prehistoric art that provides us with a glimpse into the beliefs and culture of early humans. In particular, there are a number of petroglyphs that depict human figures with strange symbols above their heads. These symbols are often interpreted as representing the soul or spirit of the individual. This theory is supported by the fact that these petroglyphs are often found in areas that were used for ritualistic purposes, such as near burial sites or sacred springs. Additionally, the use of certain geometric patterns and lines in rock art is thought to represent the movement of the soul or spirit. For example, wavy lines may symbolize the winding path of the soul as it travels to the afterlife, while straight lines may represent the journey of a soul that has already passed on. Overall, the evidence from rock art suggests that early humans had a complex understanding of the soul and its journey after death. These petroglyphs serve as a reminder of the rich spiritual traditions of our ancestors and the deep connection they had to the world around them. Number 5. Our distant ancestors. Now, some researchers have proposed that our distant ancestors may have developed animistic beliefs, which is the idea that all objects have a soul or spirit. Evidence for this theory comes from the discovery of human-like figurines made from bone and stone. These figurines were found in various places across the globe, suggesting that the practice of creating them was widespread and had cultural significance. It has been argued that these figurines were used to represent and interact with ancestral spirits. By creating these figurines, early humans could communicate with their ancestors and seek their guidance and protection. Additionally, some scholars believe that these figurines may have been used in burial rituals as a way to ensure the safe passage of the deceased into the afterlife. The idea that early humans believed that all objects had a soul or spirit is a fascinating one. If true, it would suggest that they had a deep connection to the world around them and that they believed that everything was interconnected through these spiritual beings. So overall, the evidence is pretty strong that cavemen and early humans did believe in some sort of afterlife. Their beliefs may not have been the same as ours, but they clearly had some sort of understanding of what happened after death. They buried their dead, created figurines to represent their ancestors, and decorated cave walls with paintings that depicted the souls of animals. All of this evidence suggests that early humans were not the uncivilized brutes that some people like to make them out to be. They were complex, intelligent beings who had a deep connection to the world around them. What do you think of these theories? Do you find them convincing, or do you think there is another explanation for the evidence? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching. See you next time.